All Detroiters know this story.
These two are alive.
You talk to anybody on the street of a certain age, they know this story. I'm a Detroiter, I know this story. Detroiter over there knows this story. Detroiter over there knows this story. And we all bond over this story when we talk about it. Hey, you remember the Oakland County child killer? Yeah.
Murder in Detroit suburbs is uncommon, but residents are panicky over the recent murders of children.
For more than 4 decades,
I just can't imagine 4 parents going through what they went through.
someone has gotten away with murdering children.
I trusted the cops and trusted them for 30 plus years.
Others have gotten away with a massive child abuse ring.
Your average Joe don't come to this island and have sex with a child.
I could rip this cabinet down. I could destroy this cabinet. Just to put the pain away, make the memories go away.
But what if some of the same people were involved?
There were hundreds of men in the government, men with power.
A brand new 2-part investigation started by one kid who got away.
When I was 7 years old, somebody tried to abduct me. All the things that happened to those kids could have happened to me.
We'll unpack shocking new details.
I came across this cataloging of evidence, and it stopped me in my tracks.
Where cover-ups are exposed.
This case could have been solved 3 decades ago. In fact, this case maybe was solved 3 decades ago.
And decades of silence are finally broken.
We definitely felt that we had the Oakland County child killers.
In the suburbs of Detroit, another frustrating search for a sex killer has been pressed for the past 16 months. 4 children have been murdered, the last in March.
Police say the killer has probably approached a lot of children in this area. The lucky ones have decided not to go with him.
When I was 7 years old, somebody tried to abduct me.
J. Reuben Appleman was a kid in the suburbs of Detroit in the late 1970s when he encountered a stranger.
He had sideburns, his hair was thinning, he had dark eyes, dark hair. This guy pulled up in a little car and he opened the door and he reached over and he tried to grab my arm and he said, "Get into the car." I just took off and I realized that I had almost fallen victim to the Oakland County child killer. I could have been a victim. All the things that happened to those kids could have happened to me.
The incident stuck with him for decades.
It never really occurred to me until I was raising my own kids. The gravity of that moment for me. And I got out of bed, checked on my kids, and I just started Googling the Oakland County child killer.
It triggered an investigative obsession.
In 2005, when I started digging into this case, the internet was sort of aflame. You could finally get online and search for everything you wanted, practically. I thought anybody could solve a murder case. You just gotta bury yourself in the evidence for long enough, and you'll figure it out. I want to know who killed those 4 kids. I just decided I have to solve this crime somehow.
His amateur investigation has consumed 13 years of his life. The deeper he dug, the more and more violent the story got.
The Oakland County child killer case is a nightmare. But once you accept that, there's nothing else to do but unravel it.
Today, Appleman and the family of one of the victims think they know what happened.
For 30 years, the cops were sitting on what continue to be the primary suspects.
Not only did we not catch the killer, we caught the killer, let him go kill more kids.
I think there's absolutely a possibility there's a cover-up here.
And longtime detective Corey Williams is determined to make the case.
As of now, I am the longest serving detective on the case, and proud to be. Our goal is to solve the case and to be able to tell the victims' families after so long. That would be amazing. Sorry, give me 1 second here.
It all started on this street in Ferndale, Michigan in 1976.
Right here is where Mark Stebbins started his journey home. after visiting with his mother at the American Legion Hall.
Mark wanted to leave because there was a war movie coming on.
Mark is a quiet, likable kid. He collects toy soldiers and loves all things military.
He wanted to grow up and go into the Marine Corps. He's like, that's what I want to do.
It's a 3-block walk home from the Legion, and it's broad daylight.
Now, this isn't a bustling city full of strangers. This is a tiny little middle America intersection.
I left probably about an hour or so later, and when I got home, Mark wasn't there. Then my mother called me, and she asked me, where's Mark? I says, I don't know, Mom, he's not here. And I tried to call a few of Mark's friends. Nobody had seen him.
10 hours later, still no Mark. His mother Ruth calls the police. There hasn't been a kidnapping in Ferndale in 10 years, they assured her. Mark's description goes out to the police radios. Just under 5 feet tall, red blonde hair and blue eyes. They launch a door-to-door search. No one has seen a thing.
The body of 12-year-old Mark Stebbins, 429 East Saratoga, Ferndale, was found in the rear of a parking lot of an office plaza.
I hate to use the word, his body was dumped. It was on 10 Mile, about 100 yards west of Greenfield.
He was 3/4 of a mile from home.
And there was a wall between a shopping center and some buildings, and he was placed in a snowbank next to this wall. He was fully clothed, wearing a blue parka and blue jeans.
The autopsy found Mark was smothered to death. There were rope burns on his neck, wrist, and ankles, and he'd been sodomized.
So we knew this a little more than just an abduction killing.
Just a few weeks earlier, Lorne Doan had been promoted from patrol officer to detective.
I was still a new detective, and I was learning as I was going.
Detective Doan gets a tip from a local parole officer to check out a recently released prisoner, 34-year-old Art Sloan. Convicted of sodomy in Pennsylvania, Sloan was now living in Southfield and working as a tow truck driver and mechanic in nearby Farmington Hills.
They took tapings of his car to get fiber evidence and any hairs that they had, and they stored it away.
But no physical evidence ties Sloan to Mark's murder. After months, the police have no clues, no witnesses, and no suspects. His murder seems utterly random.
We had no information beyond the fact that a child was walking down the street, disappeared, and then his body was found.
The whole family fell apart at the time. Myself, my mother.
Do you still think about it? Well, I try to put it out of my mind. Still.
It impacted her pretty hard, and she fell into bad health. I totally kicked myself in the butt. If I would have walked home with him, he may have made it home safe.
Everybody wanted to solve this really bad. At that time, of course, we didn't know that this was going to blossom like it did.
Five months after Mark's murder, another story was unraveling 1 hour north of Detroit in Port Huron. An 8-year-old boy is sexually molested so badly, he's taken to the hospital. Eddie's mother calls the police. The man arrested is a gym teacher and the director of a boys' camp for troubled teens on an isolated island in Lake Michigan, North Fox Island. What state police learn opens a Pandora's box. It was a spider's web.
And really it was a front. It was a front for pedophiles, and it was a front for pedophiles to film child pornography.
One small Michigan newspaper reporter got the tip, but it would take years to unravel.
It was one of those things where the deeper she dug, the more dirt she found. So these were bad guys. These were bad people.
All of that is in the unraveling of the Oakland County child killer case. It is exactly the worst that you can imagine.
5 hours south in Oakland County, the police investigating Mark's murder have no idea there is any connection to North Fox Island.
I was not aware of that. I mean, I was completely tuned into what was happening right here in Oakland County.
When did soup become this?
As police in Oakland County continue to hunt for Mark Stebbins' killer, Michigan State Police in St. Clair County begin to uncover the grotesque goings-on at North Fox Island, the boys' camp for troubled teens.
On that island, those boys would be routinely molested, photographed while being molested, and kept basically in a sort of captivity until their camp session was over.
The island was owned by philanthropist and lifelong bachelor Francis Sheldon.
Francis Sheldon was from a very wealthy and prominent east side of Detroit family. And in 1959, he bought Fox Island, and he said he was going to build vacation homes there. But instead, he turned the cabins and all the buildings he bought there into a place where he could bring kids and film them and molest them.
The camp operated for 2 summers in 1975 and 76. Eventually, an arrest warrant goes out for Sheldon for 2 counts of sexual abuse. But by then, he's cleaned out his Ann Arbor home and fled in his private plane.
The boys on North Fox Island were roughly the same age as Mark Stebbins. We know that the men that traveled up to Fox also operated in Detroit and throughout the suburbs surrounding Detroit. Now we can say nobody made any connection between the abduction of Mark Stebbins and North Fox Island. I think is not necessarily believable. They all knew each other, they all depended on each other because it's a community of people operating to industrialize the molestation and photography of children.
Police continue to investigate North Fox Island, while the mystery in Oakland County is about to grow worse. 3 nights before Christmas, in a suburb just north of Ferndale, Carol Robinson and her 12-year-old daughter Jill get into an argument.
I had asked her to help with dinner, and she refused and said she didn't want to be here, and it just made a snotty remark again, and I just think I had it. And I just said, well, Jill, if you don't like being here, why don't you just get your coat on and stand out in the front yard and think about it, and when you feel like talking about it, come on back in.
Jill packed her bag and put her little book in her backpack and rode off into the night to go and see her dad.
She wouldn't come back in.
Her dad, Tom, an English teacher, lives a few miles away in Birmingham, but Jill never arrives. And shortly before midnight, Tom calls the police. A family friend says they saw Jill pedaling northward on Woodward Avenue around 7:30, about an hour after she left home. Other than that, the police have nothing. And like Mark Stebbins, Jill Robinson just seemed to have vanished. It's the day after Christmas. A motorist on I-75 near Troy spots something in the snow on the side of the road. The body of 6th grader Jill Robinson. Jill was laying on her back fully clothed and wearing her blue knapsack. There was a gunshot wound to her face. Unlike Mark Stebbins, the autopsy reveals Jill hadn't been sexually molested. She'd been shot at close range at the spot where her body was found.
Some people believe this means she wasn't asphyxiated. Some people believe this means that she wasn't victim to the alleged Oakland County child killer. Other people, like retired cop Jack Kalbfleisch, an original task force member, believes, no, she probably was asphyxiated.
When a person is suffocated, there's still a certain amount of oxygen in the lungs. I believe when she was dropped, the pressure on the backpack caused her to make a moaning sound as the oxygen escaped. At that point, he shot her to make sure she was dead.
The autopsy also reveals that wherever Jill had been held for the past 3 days, someone had washed her clothes and fed her.
Yeah, it was, this was a bad period. It's one of those things that never goes away. So I'm stuck thinking about it every morning and every evening.
Both the Troy and Royal Oak police talked to her family and friends. No one knows where she'd been or who might have done this. The only lead? A witness report seeing a light blue Pontiac Le Mans stopped on the side of I-75 where Jill's body was found.
As they approached, the car pulled out from the side of the road, and after they passed, they noticed the car pull back in to the side of the road on 16 and I-75.
You talk to Jack Kalbfleisch and he'll tell you time and again that he tried to get this lead looked at. There's plenty of documentation that says this lead into the Le Mans is a credible lead. And so you wonder why it wasn't looked at greater lengths.
The day is Sunday, the second day of January 1977. Christine Mihalich wanted to go to a party store just a few blocks from her home in Berkeley.
Chris had helped my mom take the Christmas decorations down, and Chris had asked if she could walk to 7-Eleven to buy a teen magazine of sorts.
And I told her no, because she had to cross 12 Mile, and that's a busy street. And I remember her saying to me, well, I did you a favor. And she's, well, you know, won't you do this for me? I said, if you go to the light and promise me you'll cross at the light, I said, I'll let you go.
The store is just a few blocks from the house. Debbie figures Chris will be home within half an hour. After an hour, though, there's no sign of Christine.
And I thought, well, maybe she ran into her dad and he picked her up and they just forgot to give me a call. It was getting dark, and that's when I really became concerned.
Debbie reports her daughter missing to the Berkeley police.
They just took the information and they told me they were going to put it on the 11 o'clock news. And that always struck me kind of odd that they were so quick to get that out on the news. It never entered my mind really that she was kidnapped. You know, you just don't think in those terms.
The police retrace her last known steps.
We know that she made it to the 7-Eleven store because the clerk did give a statement that she made it there.
And that was the last she was seen.
I never connected it with Jill, and never with Mark. I was frantic, but she was going to show up. But after the first 24 hours, then, you know, your imagination just goes wild, and then you're obviously thinking of, you know, something tragic's happened.
The police are thinking the same thing. Christine was the third child to go missing in Oakland County in almost 11 months, and the first two were murdered.
My boss and I, we started thinking maybe we've got a serial killer.
Southfield police form a task force, including all local forces around Oakland County. Lieutenant Jack Kalbfleisch from the Birmingham police was at that first meeting.
And that was the start of my investigating the child killings. The task force was 50 to 60 men from various departments who volunteered their people to come over, whether they were one of the victim cities or not. They said, let's get this person.
The public is now taking notice.
If your youngsters may have been here, may have seen something, if they may have been approached by a stranger, ask them about it.
We had a number that you could call to the task force, and we had several people that would write out the tips, and we'd go from there.
19 days after she went missing, about 7 miles from Berkeley, on a dead-end street in Franklin Village, a mailman spots something in the ditch.
He saw something red sticking out of the snow. Turned out it was Christine's hand.
When I went to the crime scene, the body was still at the side of the road.
She was laying partially covered in snow, her arms sticking out, and, obviously dead.
Wednesday on the season premiere of COTS.
It's 1977, and Michigan police continue investigating a child abuse ring which operated from an isolated island in Lake Michigan. Almost 300 miles south, a third child has been murdered and placed in the snow in suburban Detroit.
There was a knock at the door, and there was law enforcement and a minister, and I knew right then that it was, when it happened.
After 19 agonizing days, 12-year-old Christine Mihalik of Royal Oak is now the third child to be abducted, murdered, and dumped in the snow at the side of the road. Christine's autopsy reveals similarities to those of Jill Robinson and Mark Stebbins. Like Jill, she had not been sexually assaulted, but like Mark, she was suffocated. All were fully clothed, washed, well-fed, and all three killed hours before they were dumped in the snow.
And that's when we said, we are full scale. We're talking about the same person or persons.
After the abduction of Christine Mihalik, which was victim number 3, the papers started filling up with articles about these kids. Started to become on the radar of parents and school teachers that we're probably looking for a serial killer or killers or some entity.
Parents in neighborhoods where the victims lived are taking special precautions.
Now my kids aren't playing out. They're with me all the time.
People didn't even let their children go in the backyard without a parent being there. The very things you had moved to escape when you came from Detroit had landed there.
By now, hundreds of tips are pouring into the fledgling task force. One stands out. Tip number 370.
Thomas Waldron from the Flint Police Department called my boss in Southfield and relayed to him that they had a suspect in custody for one of their cases that said he knew who the Oakland County child killer was.
That suspect is 27-year-old Gregory Green, a pedophile arrested for molesting a young boy in Flint, Michigan.
And it was obvious this is what we were looking for. So my boss and I went up there.
Detective Doan has never spoken publicly about what happened. Under questioning, Green tells Doan that his friend and frequent partner in crime killed the first victim, Mark Stebbins.
He said it was Christopher Bush.
25-year-old Christopher Bush lives in Alma, Michigan, where he runs a restaurant, The Scotsman. He and Green are accused of forcing boys into sex acts and lewd photography. Apart from these charges, Bush has no previous record. His father, H. Lee Bush, is a highly placed General Motors executive.
We went up to Helma where he was staying and we arrested him. He wanted to go back and get a toothbrush and We thought maybe this would get us in his house and see what was there, and it did. He said, I got nothing to hide, you can go through it.
What they find is chilling.
We found a suitcase full of, I think it was magazines or cutouts of young kids.
They also find child porn films on 8mm reels, ropes and ligatures, and 2 shotguns.
He admitted being a pedophile to picking up kids, and 2 of them were definitely in the areas of 2 of our kids that were abducted and killed. One being Mark Stebbins at 9 in Woodward, and the other Christine Mihalik at the 7-Eleven.
Bush didn't hold back about his fantasies. He was obsessed with boys.
It sounded like he and Green had worked together and talked about abducting young boys and how they would keep them during the day. One would work days and the other would work nights, and then they'd always have somebody there.
It's damning. Detective Doan asks Bush to take a polygraph.
He says, I got nothing to hide and I want to take it.
The Oakland County Assistant Chief Prosecutor flies up to Flint to witness the polygraph.
They have a glass window that you can see in, but they can't see out. And you could stand there and listen to the polygraph.
Bush denies any knowledge or involvement in the killings. The examiner shocks the police and says Bush was being truthful.
We thought for sure he would flunk it or confess, and charges would be made against him. We were all kind of flabbergasted when he passed the polygraph, because we definitely felt that we had the Oakland County child killers.
Bush still faces criminal sexual conduct charges, but with no previous record, his family posts bond and Bush is set free.
You know, the bottom line was, look, he was a suspect, and we did polygraph him, and he passed the polygraph. And polygraphs back in the day were the be-all and end-all.
Polygraph results weren't admissible in court, but back then the police used them as a key tool in eliminating potential suspects. Green also passes the polygraph, but isn't from a wealthy family and can't post bond and remains in custody. The 2 are no longer suspects.
Roughly a week after Christopher Bush is released on bond from the criminal sexual conduct charges, Timothy King goes missing. And I don't find that to be coincidental.
1, 2, here we go!
Authorities fear Timmy has been kidnapped by a psychotic who has killed several youngsters in the last year.
7 days after the cops' most promising suspect, Christopher Bush, was released from custody, 11-year-old Tim King borrows 30 cents from his sister to buy a candy bar at the pharmacy a few blocks away.
So Timothy King was taken from this parking lot. He had gone to the pharmacy, and he had come out the back. Tim would have walked here off and on his whole childhood, just like the other kids, just like I would have.
We went up to Peabody's and had dinner. Marion and I got home about 8:30 or 9, and Tim was not here.
Came home and there were police cars in the driveway. Mom ran out and said, have you seen Tim? And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, he's missing. And then I grabbed Tim's baseball bat and just ran around looking for him because we knew this had to be something bad.
Tim has been missing only a few hours, but this time the police know to act immediately.
Investigators will continue to work into the night, hoping to find a lead on Timothy King's whereabouts.
The possibility of catching the person with Timothy still alive and in the trunk of a car being transported was very much the hope.
Every available police officer in Birmingham was pressed into the search for Timothy King, hoping, praying that the youngster would be found alive.
There were helicopters all over Oakland County searching for Tim.
Everywhere you went, there was lockdown. Police cars were in force, en masse, everywhere, checking cars driving around. The cities went bonkers.
Playgrounds emptied. Doors locked. Panic settles in.
Dear newsman, I hope that you find the unknown killer that keeps killing every little kid. Have good luck. I'm a 9-year-old girl from Tecumseh, Michigan. I'm a little girl that has nightmares at night when I try to go to sleep.
The story goes national. The Michigan State Police take charge of the task force into what is now being called the Oakland County Child Killer. 2 days later, police get their first lead. Someone thinks they've caught a glimpse of the killer.
A witness said that she had seen Tim talking to a man, and he was standing next to a blue gremlin.
80 detectives working on each shift, all of them, looking for this man.
With that flyer everywhere, everybody knew about the Oakland County Child Killer. It was on the news, it was on the radio, it was in the papers, constantly.
Well, all hell broke loose. Every blue gremlin in this county and surrounding counties was a suspect. And police were reluctant to, we don't have a stop, and you can't just do it on suspicion, you gotta have probable cause. I said, forget it, I'll take the heat. You stop the gremlins when you see them. Nobody complained. Every gremlin owner understood.
The blue gremlin became the iconic figure of this case. Everybody in the city of Detroit was looking for a blue gremlin.
In desperation, Marion and Barry pleaded with their son's kidnapper.
She had said one of his favorite meals was Kentucky Fried Chicken, and she would get that for him when he came home.
We love you, Tim. God bless you. Stay tough. Say your prayers, and we're with you, buddy. And Kathy and Chris and Mark say to treat him just like you would a brother. And we all want him back. And please send him.
Hey, Dad.
Hi, gang. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
This is the first time Tim's siblings have talked together on camera.
They tried to hide things from us. They wouldn't let us watch TV. They hid these papers we have from that time.
As much as they tried to take our mind off of things and cheer us up, you could tell deep in their face that it was bleak.
I didn't think he was ever going to come back because of the other kids that were missing.
Barry was right.
After nearly a week of waiting, hoping against hope, the parents of 11-year-old Timothy King of Birmingham were today confronted with their worst fears.
I was in bed with the radio on, and announcement came that they'd found a boy's body in Livonia, and I was 99% sure it was Tim.
I drove down